We're going to take a little different direction now in our pre-Christian teachings of Yeshua, starting with the next things I'll be releasing in March. We're going to study the initiatic mysteries of classical antiquity and look at the historical evolution of archetypal spiritual consciousness that underlies and illuminates the teachings of Yeshua. There's a great deal of synthesis in the teachings of Yeshua, and they are a final development of a very long tradition of oracular and mystery and esoteric work around the Mediterranean, not only in Judaism, but in many other traditions. So we're going to look at the greater context of Yeshua's spirituality. We've been able to recover the extant public and initiatic teachings of Yeshua in previous presentations. We've examined them in their context of first century Midrashic and Kabbalistic Jewish Messianic mysticism. We've surveyed the evolution of Hebrew history, religion, and institutions of prophecy that underlay and can illuminate the teachings for us. We've also examined ancient Hebrew religion and post-exilic Judaism in the context of their Near Eastern culture, their gods and their goddesses. But now we're going to learn about the more ancient development of spirituality and the history of religions thousands of years before that prepared the way for the rise of Hebrew religion, showing archetypal parallels in their ritual and many other things that help us to understand. We'll go deeply into the Hellenic and Hellenistic oracular, Sibylline, and mystery religions that shaped post-exilic Judaism. In this section, in the first part, we're going to look at the shamanic roots and the mother goddesses, because God was originally a woman. We're going to look at what prayer was and what deity was, what was a god, the patriarchy that eventually swept down and subsumed the matriarchal and partnership cultures that existed. We're going to look at some of the interesting developments, like going from the ancient god of the all Pan to its development in iconography to the Christian Satan. We're going to look at these through the Taurian and Aegean and Piscean ages, or of the human psyche, the Dorian, Aryan, and Piscean periods, which I'll explain later. We're going to look at shamanism, ancestral worship, and totem animals, and how they set up the ideas we have of God. And then in part 2, we're going to look at the characteristics of the ancient mystery religions, how some of them, the actual initiatic rites, survive actually in Freemasonry today, the higher concepts of the ancient mystery religions, the moral code and preparation and initiation, what we call the dromena, legomena, and deignoumena, the drama or things that were done, the legomena, things that were said, and the deignoumena, the things that were shown by the Hierophant. And we're going to look at the experience of apotheosis that initiates finally achieved. And in Egypt, Crete, Greece, Asia Minor, and the Near East, there are so many things that contributed to the rise of the concepts that we have of spirituality that came through later through ancient Hebrew religion and Judaism and so on. So part 3, we're going to look at the shamanic and priestly communication with the dead, communication with ancestors. I have a little painting here of a person with his ear next to the Sphinx, listening for psychic communication that was also done with priests, with dead kings and things like that. We're going to look at the Egyptian concept of the soul and spirit, Egyptian funerary and communication with the dead that was done through priestly rites. We're going to take a look at some excerpts from Raymond Moody's movie about the Necronomicon, which was a place of communication with the dead that was set up in ancient Greece from his video called To the Tunnel and Beyond. In part 4, we're going to look at Egyptian stories of creation, which were stories of emanation, and set the stage for later Jewish concepts of this. We're going to look at Osirian temples and initiatic rites and funerary services. We're going to look at 4 ancient shrines and their theogonies. We're going to see what is really contained in the Egyptian Books of the Dead and how it became important. We're going to look at priestly initiation rites and divine vision. And then in part 5, we're going to look at the Cretan Minoan initiatic matriarchy and the lesser and greater mysteries of Eleusis, which developed from them after the conquest by the Mycenaeans. So we want to look at the ancient origins of the mysteries, the sacred myth of Hades and Persephone and the divine underworld, how temple precincts were built and what they did, what is involved in the initiatic training and the rites, the orge, or the participation in the divine emotions of a deity, later became what we call the orgy, but was not really what the meaning of orge was in the mysteries. And we're going to look at what we know about the teachings of the mysteries, and the synthema was a way of, it's kind of a creed that was put together, and the epoptea, which was a divine vision that occurred at the end. In part 6, we're going to look at the Greek and Delphic and Sibylline and other oracles that the Pythagoreans and the Pholarchi and many other people developed. We'll look at the oracle of Gaia during the matriarchal period. We're going to learn about Apollo slaying the python and the patriarchal priests of Apollo who took over the matriarchal caves of Gaia. And we're going to learn more about the preeminence of Delphi and the oracle there. And we're going to study more about priestesses and oracles. And finally, in this series, we're going to end with a look at, or a survey of, the mystery religions and mystery cults in the Hellenistic world. We're going to take an overview of this whole period. We're going to look at Pythagoras, Crotona, and the Neo-Pythagorean communities, the Pythagorean Hellenistic diaspora, Apollonius of Tyana, the mysteries of Hermes Trismegistus, the Poimandres, Hermetic training and initiation, Jewish wisdom and Merkaba schools, Christian and Gnostic schools, Neoplatonism, Plotinus, Proclus, Porphyry, Iamblichus, and the Egyptian mysteries. Now you might be wondering, why is this study necessary to give context to Yeshua? Well, the initiatic religions pre-existed Israel. They coexisted with Israel. They interacted with post-exilic Hellenic, that's right after the exile, and Hellenistic Judaism a few centuries later, and exerted strong influences on not only diaspora Jewish communities all over the Hellenistic world, but upon the Jewish wisdom schools and Messianic Judaism contemporary with Yeshua. Long before Israel formed, the nomadic, patriarchal, Aryan, and Mycenaean warrior cultures had conquered the peaceful, settled, agrarian, matriarchal, and partnership civilizations of the Mediterranean, taken over the sacred caves of the prophetesses of Gaia, and installed their sky gods and male priesthoods to rule them. Prophetism originated before Israel and came into Israel from other cultures. The word we use, prophet, is from the Greek term prophetes, not the Hebrew term nabi. Prophet is much older than Israel. The Jewish priests and later scribes who compiled and redacted what we know as the Torah or the Old Testament were patriarchal Yahwists ardently opposed to the earlier matriarchal forms of Hebrew religion, Hebrew temple religion, and they portrayed the prophets of Baal as pagan infidels in their biblical histories, and the Canaanite queen Jezebel as deserving her cruel death, pushed out a window, killed and eaten by dogs. At this patriarchal reaction against the femininity of spirituality and religion of the gods was something that was changed radically in the teachings of Yeshua. Yeshua's teachings were not patriarchal. So in fact, Israel inherited its institution of prophecy from the Near Eastern religions of Baal, even though they later talked about how evil the priests of Baal were. Yeshua restored and universalized the archetypal mysteries. The Initiatic mysteries had maintained the ancient balance of matriarchal, patriarchal, masculine partnership spirituality. Yeshua restored this archetypal gender balance in his teachings and actions, and he admitted followers through moral vows and initiatic baptism, just as they had in the mysteries. And these things were then transmitted in the early churches, which, by the way, used the term mysteries for what they did. Mysteries meant rites of initiation. Yeshua taught that there was no distinction of male and female before the Abba. As Paul says in Galatians, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Women made up about a third of the early church leaders that Paul greeted in his epistles. He being Yeshua, epitomized the archetypal theos aner of the Hellenistic mysteries, the divine man. And he was understood that way and interpreted that way, and that's how he became worshipped as a divine being. He stretched Judaism to greater and more universal limits than any other Jewish sages could have ever imagined. The early churches adopted the Greek term mysteries for its Eucharistic and other rites, and even misunderstood Yeshua's apocalyptic ratzim, or secrets of the heavens, as the mysteries of the kingdom. So intentionally or not, Yeshua laid the groundwork for a radical new mystery religion that would eventually overtake all the others and make them obsolete, and in fact drive them into obscurity. We'll learn about the Hellenic, Pythagorean, and Jewish diasporas, which happened at about the same time. The Pythagorean community at Crete was a powerful group of scientists, engineers, and mystics that were hired by kings to design superior weapons of war like catapults and so on. But they also were mystics who undertook various kinds of meditative and contemplative rituals, and such as the greeting of the sun and the sunrise in the morning and so on. They were feared by common people and rival kings. The city of Sybaris attacked the Pythagorean community, probably rightfully so, because their strong military leader, who was Milo of Crete, who was considered to be the most powerful athlete of his time, had led military people against Sybaris. When Sybaris then came and had a lot of support, attacked the Pythagorean community, while they were all gathered in one building, they broke it down, burned it, and killed many, with only the younger members surviving and driven away. And according to legend, Milo held up the roof so that people could escape. Similar attacks on Pythagorean communities in other Hellenic cities occurred, driving members away and destroying the Pythagorean communities. Individuals were dispersed far and wide in a Pythagorean diaspora, and this occurred roughly contemporarily with the Jewish Babylonian exile and diaspora. during the 5th to 3rd centuries of the before the Christian era, after the Jewish priesthood had been strongly influenced by the cosmology of the Zoroastrian priests of Babylon, they came into contact with Pythagoreans. Pythagorean letter-number cosmology, the tetractys, and other elements were absorbed into Jewish mystic and midrashic tradition, producing the concepts of the Sephira and the Sephirotic tree and the Hebrew letter-number cosmology and so on. All this existed centuries before Yeshua came on the scene. Later contact of the Jewish wisdom schools with Hellenistic philosophy and mysticism were syncretized as concepts like the silver cord that we meet in Ecclesiastes, or Hebel, the idea of Maya, or of that all is illusion, that Koheleth tells us about. The diaspora Jews of Alexandria fused Egyptian funerary concepts into the Jewish Kabbalistic concept of the soul, which probably already was somewhat influenced by the more ancient contact with Egypt. And these and many more forms of religious syncretism informed the initiatic Kabbalistic teachings of Yeshua that we have explored in earlier lectures. So we need now to look at what those things were, what those influences were, and I will, as I deliver the series, I will make reference to parallels that occurred later in Judaism and Yeshua's teaching. But this whole process didn't stop with Yeshua. The brilliant teaching that Yeshua both synthesized and advanced to a much higher level was a great milestone in the history of human spiritual consciousness, and it served then as the basic impulse and platform for a whole new generation of creative spiritual exploration that came through various channels of Christianity, Manichaean, and the many schools of Western mystery tradition that continue into the 21st century. Therefore, after we complete the series on the initiatic mysteries of classical antiquity, we will examine the Western mystery tradition that took its roots from what were understood to be the secret or esoteric teaching of or about Jesus and the Christ. These will not include Catholic, Orthodox, and monastic Christian mysticism. They will include the following: the Hellenistic roots, the spiritual and alchemical period, 1st through the 9th centuries, and here are the topics. I'm not going to read them all to you, but all of these things were post-Yeshua and had roots in many of the impulse and the spiritual insights that Yeshua brought. We're going to look at the Celtic San Graal, or Holy Grail, to the Christian Sangreal, the Holy Blood, in the 4th through the 12th centuries. Constantine, the Byzantine Church, Arius, and so on. There's an awful lot to discuss in that. We're going to look at the Hermetic sciences, the astrological and the idea of the microcosm and macrocosm in the 1st through the 9th centuries. We're going to see how the idea of the divine man, the Christ, the Adam Kadmon, perpetuated itself in astrological and cosmological ideas. We're going to look at the goetic arts, the magical arts, angel magic, and the period of theurgy and so on, the 1st through the 21st centuries. We're going to examine a great deal about that when we go through there. You can see what some of the topics are here. We're going to look at the what led up to the Hermetic Renaissance, the Heresy and Inquisition period, 10th, 14th centuries, the Bogomiles, and the suppressed heretical traditions that derived probably from the Manichaean, which derived from the Mandaean and the Christian teachings. So there's a great deal there that we'll look at. And then we're going to look at the whole history of the Knights Templar and Freemasonry, which is, by the way, an introduction to a complete seminar entitled Esoteric Freemasonry, which you'll find in the catalog of the Wisdom Seminar site. And things related to that. And then we look at the Hermetic Renaissance, a period of the 15th and 16th centuries of the Christian era, from the Arabic and European alchemists and Albertus Magnus and so on, up to the Fratres Lucas and the mission of Ficino and many other things, the Corpus Hermeticum, etc. And then we will look at the Rosicrucian Enlightenment, the 17th and 18th centuries. We'll look at German and English Rosicrucianism. This is a copy of the German Fama Fraternitatis, the declaration of the coming of Rosicrucianism and so on. We'll study the Illuminists. And in the 19th century, the post-Inquisition flowering. Once the Inquisition was over, the French Revolution had occurred. We're going to look at Hermetic and Masonic fascination with Egypt and the Egyptian rites of Memphis and Mizraim and mesmerism, the Gnostic ecclesiae, and so on. We're going to then look at European occult schools and things that occurred in the 20th to 21st century. We're going to look at Max Theon, the Kabbalist who was the teacher of Blavatsky, and Mira Alfasa, who became the mother of Sri Aurobindo. All kinds of other things, from Johnny Appleseed to Vivekananda. And in the 20th and 21st centuries, the whole synthesis that occurred with Golden Dawn and Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and Manly Hall, the Roriks, and so on. Rudolf Steiner, Edgar Cayce, Godfrey Ray King, and the I Am movement and various new schools. This is a photograph of Steiner, who died in 1925. This is Nicholas Roerich and his wife Helena, who Helena translated the works of Blavatsky. Both of them were probably the earliest Caucasians to explore, to deeply explore the Himalayas and Tibetan Buddhism. And Nicholas Roerich was the person who convinced the League of Nations that during warfare that all those involved would not attack cultural museums and art. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that the Nazis stole and saved all the paintings and arts and so on. And he died before he could receive a Nobel Prize for that. He was also the teacher, the spiritual teacher, for the vice president of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a very remarkable man himself, Wallace. And this is one example of the many Roerich paintings. You can find them online that were made up in the Himalayas. This is a painting that was made by a student of Godfrey Ray King in the I Am movement up in Mount Shasta back in the 30s, when she was watching him speak to a huge congregation. And she envisioned him and saw above him angelic beings that were higher, the higher selves that were inspiring him, and so on. I've used this as a graphic to illustrate the idea of the Kabbalistic bodies of the lower and the higher self, and so on. Now, concerning the upcoming presentations that I will be beginning in March, I made the Initiatic Mysteries of Classical Antiquity series in 2001 and 2, 15, 16 years ago, and I put them online as Java presentations from my students. However, during that period, the Java software and security versions and so on changed and advanced and got tighter and tighter, and now it's very difficult to view these presentations through the Wisdom Seminar site unless you are a real computer geek, and even if you are, sometimes they won't play no matter what you do with Java. Fortunately, I can get them on my laptop, and that's about the only way, because unfortunately I no longer have the original PowerPoint presentations from which they were converted. So I had to restore them by playing them on my laptop and recording them as MP4 videos that I will be putting online as YouTube videos in the Pre-Christian series starting in March. As a consequence, there are several glitches in the restored videos as a result of the only process available for me to save them. The sound is a bit tinny, and some graphics zoom on and immediately disappear. That doesn't happen too often, but it does happen, and other little kinds of glitches. So I just would say, if you come to a part where it seems like nothing's happening, it is a movie, so you can move ahead on it, but generally it's all edited and put together pretty well. The series is well worth watching. The Western Mystery Tradition, Medieval and Modern series is a different one. That will follow, which I made in the years 2003 to 8. Has no such problems because I still have the original narrated PowerPoint presentations and was able to convert them into WMV format. Both series, the Initiatic Traditions and the Western Mystery, comprise many hours of very interesting and informative stuff that I think you will find is very useful in your spiritual understanding. And they are core courses for my students who train for consecration as bishops of the home temple, because I consider this education to be highly relevant for Jesus studies. So that's why I'm putting it up as part of this series, and I think you will enjoy them very much. Well, I want to remind you that for a $5 patronage, and you can do patronages for $1, $2, or $5 or $10, for a $5 patronage per video presentation on Patreon, you will receive a PDF file of the pre-Christian teachings of Yeshua and all the other ones that are received by people who make $1 and $2 commitments. You can purchase the Kindle ebook file online for $9.99. The paperback version is available online at lulu.com for $20 plus shipping. And from me at my Yeshua workshops for $18, where it's much less expensive. But this is a very comprehensive book on what we know of the extant historical teachings of Yeshua, taken out of their early Christian redactional spin and put back into the Jewish context. So please click on the Patreon link in my description just below the video to become a patron, helping to sponsor my new videos on the pre-Christian teachings of Yeshua. Thank you.